Welcome to our community. Susie Thomas with you this morning. Very happy to welcome back Shelley Shepard Gray. She is the author of the Walnut Creek series. You may have already read, and if not, order them now and read them. The Loyal One, the Protective One, the Patient One, and some others resting around Walnut Creek. And now we've got the Trustworthy One. Good morning, Shelley.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's always good to talk to you. We love this series because even though you don't live here in Ohio, in Walnut Creek, you visited it, and it must have had an impact because you've got a whole series of books based on our backyard.
You know, I really do love that area. We recently moved to Colorado, a little bit over a year ago. But before then, we lived just north of Cincinnati for 20 years, and I have a group of Amish friends that I'm fairly close with, and Sugar Creek. I've set several series there, and it just so happens that there's a really great store in Walnut Creek, which is the Walnut Creek Cheese Shop, and every time I'm there, I'm always like, can we go there? And so it seemed like a natural progression to set this series there.
Oh, and do they just do your friends just think this is just so fun that there's a whole series of them?
Oh, you know, they do. They think it's funny that I've written so many books. About the Amish.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my very first time, my first book, and about the Amish, and I had asked my Amish friend Clara for some advice, and she was a little hesitant, and I was scared to offend her by asking the wrong things.
Yes.
And anyway, here we are. I think I've written over 50 Amish novels now, and I keep sending them to her, and I'm always kind of put a note like, if you don't want any more, just let me know. But she passes them to her friends, and they all think it's kind of fun. So I appreciate that.
It's a genre that really is very popular, and there's just something so wonderful about their way of life, the pace, that we all kind of started to get to experience worldwide with this COVID thing, where suddenly, now we were dependent on electronics way more than they are, but the fact that, you know, I had a whole day where I would just wake up and think, what do I want to do today? That was unheard of. That was unheard of before that. The pace just slowed down, and there was just something nice about being able to think of your neighbors, to check on your neighbors and see how everybody was doing. Is that way of life kind of what really appealed to you? Just something about the slower pace, just the nicer way of living?
I've always loved reading historical books. I've written a couple also, and I think at first that was really what struck me is I was able to have a whole new a genre to research, and so that is what I think originally instigated, maybe I'll write a book about the Amish. But really, it's when I started making connections, that's when I think my books and the stories just really started taking place. And I have to totally agree with you. I mean, I thought many times about Clara and her husband and her extended family, and how this COVID experience probably didn't change them very much at all.
Right.
And, you know, it was funny. I love to do puzzles in the winter, and my friend Clara does too. And I was sitting there doing a puzzle one Sunday, and my husband was just like, you should leave a message on Clara's phone, and tell her that, you know, you've been thinking of her.
Yeah.
I don't know. I imagine most of your listeners know that a lot of the Amish, they kind of have a phone shanty down the street, and so you leave a message, and then when she has time, she listens, then she'll call me back.
Yes. We took a drive through Amish country, and my husband made that comment. I wonder if they know anything's going on. Because, you know, I wonder if they've heard of coronavirus. So it was...
You know, I did see in the news feed that one of the factories in Berlin, over in Holmes County. They were helping making, I don't know, face shields or something like that.
Yes.
So it's in which to me just sounded. I wasn't surprised at all. They're such caring people. I'm sure they were all like, okay, how can we help? So.
It was really exciting to see and very interesting to see different manufacturers in Amish country and in the area completely make a shift of what they normally mass produce into making masks and hand sanitizer. It was amazing to see. And I kind of wonder if maybe there'll be a branch of those businesses now that always produce those things so that we are a little more self-reliant when they need those kinds of things, hopefully never again in my lifetime. But
Right.
it was really something to see just a coming together, maybe that hasn't happened since World War II, where the whole
Right.
country is working together to battle this bug the little enemy of a bug. It was really something. But as you say, for the Amish, it was Tuesday,
Yeah, my husband is a frustrated gardener, and he's always trying to grow better tomatoes, and he's gone with me several times to go look at Clara's gardens. She has a regular garden and then her really big one, and
Oh my!
and I remember hearing that a lot of people, just because when you go to the grocery store, everything was just kind of running out. They're like,
Yeah.
we need to be more like the Amish
Yes.
and be more self-reliant, be better gardeners.
Yes.
And I don't think you and I are the only ones that really thought, maybe we need to think more about what the Amish are doing.
I absolutely, yeah. And just to we have the ability to grow food in our yards, go ahead and do it. And then we're not worried about whether or not the grocery store is stocked or not. I'm interested in those early conversations because I think a lot of people feel you see someone who's dressed a little differently than you, lives a little bit differently than you, really loving the same God, just living it out in a way that looks differently. And I can imagine, we don't want to say anything that's going to be offensive, but I bet it was really interesting building that friendship of things you would be, asking and what she would be responding. And maybe she was curious about, your English way of life as well. Tell me about how those conversations grew and deepened.
Well, luckily for me, I was blessed to go to church in Cincinnati with a lady who was Lutheran just like me, but she had grown up Mennonite in Sugar Creek, and this lady, Clara, had babysat her kids when they all had little bitty kids together. And so luckily that's how I met her. It was from a friend of a friend. And I think there was a little bit of trust there for her about me, just because she knew, well, at least her friend trusted me.
Right.
But I have to tell you, I vividly remember the first two times I went up to see her, and I was again in the company of her friend. But the first time, gosh, we were all going to a quilt show, and it was a group of ladies from my church. And anyway, we stopped in front of Clara's house, and it felt like a bunch of high school kids. We're all like letting people in and switching seats, and everyone getting all settled again. Anyway, I ended up in the back seat with Clara, and I remember it was in the winter because my usual winter wardrobe is a sweater, blue jeans, and cowboy boots.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had really worried about this. Before I left, I knew I was going to get to meet her, and I knew she knew I was writing a book about the Amish. Mm. And I worried about everything. From my long red nails to the jeans. Should I not wear jeans?
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I kind of had to realize that, well, I am who I am. I even if I wore a long dress, no makeup, and cut off my nails, I'm not going to be Amish. So I might as well just be Shelley. And Anyway, I remember she didn't have a lot to say to me. I know at first she was just looking like, who is this girl that I'm sitting with? And she said something like, "You're the writer." And I smiled and I said, "Yes." And she's like, "Oh."
Oh, gosh.
But you know what? By the end of that day, I had gotten up the nerve to ask her some really basic questions. And I think, and I asked her if I could please ask her just 3 questions, because I didn't want to be annoying.
Nice,
And I could
yeah.
tell she was nervous. She was like thinking, "Oh no, is Shelley going to ask me all about my religion or questions or taxes or whatever?"
Mhm.
And really, I'll share these with you just because it really just kind of makes fun of myself. But the first one I asked her, I said, I have my Amish character has a hope chest. I've seen them in the stores. Do the Amish girls usually use one, or is this just something that y'all build for tourists? And she said yes. And I was like, okay, well, at least I got my answer.
Yes, and which was it? Or was it both?
Yeah, it was yes, they do have hope chests.
Okay. Okay.
So I was like, okay. And then the second one, it was actually, I was writing the second book in the series, and I told her, I said, "Clara, I'm in such a pickle. When I wrote this first book, I had no idea anyone would read it, and I got the timing all wrong with the second one. Anyway, I need the couple from the first book to get married." And she said, "Okay." And I said, "But, I have them getting married in April, and I don't know what to do." And she just kind of stared at me, and she said, "Well, why is April a bad time to get married?" And I said, "Well, even I know that, the Amish only can get married in November." And she was like, "Well, why is that?" And I said, I said, "The harvest." And she just kind of, I think she did everything but roll her eyes. And she said, "Shelley, my husband works at the brick factory. We can get married whenever we want." And I tell this story a lot because it was kind of a turning point for me. One of them is that, I had done some research, and in my mind, all the Amish, they did, everyone, no matter what state they lived in, what community they lived in, whether they were old order, new order, you name it, I thought they were all exactly the same.
Had a farm, of course.
And I couldn't have been more wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, you take a community of 40,000 people, like there is the Amish population in Holmes County, and everyone would be different.
Yes.
And so it was just kind of a big aha moment. The third question I asked her was our icebreaker, I want to say, and she kind of was interested. She's like, "All right, what's your next question?" And I said, "All right." I said, "Well, my heroine had done something bad around her during her Rumspringa. It's keeping her up at night. I need her to know that it's 2:00 in the morning." And Claire was like, "Okay." And I said, "Well, but I don't know how she would know that. I mean, are there clocks in bedrooms?" And she said, "Yes." And back then, sometimes I would get confused between the Amish way of life and say Little House on the Prairie. Like I was thinking,
Yes.
like a grandfather clock that was hand carved. And so I thought, I'm going to just be a really good author and get this detail right. So I said, "Well, can you tell me what it looks like?" And she said, "Okay." And she said, she kind of held her hands together, and she said, "It's about this big, and there's red lights and they flash." And I said, "Wait a minute, it's a digital clock?" And she said, "Well, yes." And at least I knew this part. I said, "Well, I guess you use batteries, right?" And she said, "Sure. I got it at Walmart."
Oh, my.
And
I was even thinking a wind-up alarm clock.
Yeah. And I just kind of made me laugh, and I was like, "Okay." Yes. And then I said, "Well, wait a minute. Do you use the alarm clock?" And that's when she really just kind of started chuckling, and she said, "Shelley, Clyde gets up at 4 a.m. to go to the brickyard." what did you think? We used a rooster, and and
Yes.
that kind of like I think she realized that
Yeah.
I was in good faith trying to do my best about the Amish, and also I must have needed a lot of help, because after that I would write her notes and like just letters, and we became pen pals, and I
Yes.
would write her a couple of notes and questions, and she would always answer. And but honestly, now when we see her, I mean, we really don't talk about my books or anything. We've just been talking about what we're doing. It's
Mm.
common for us to be sharing what's been happening with our kids. Um, what we've been cooking that we really liked, what recipes have been good, what diets that we've been working on. So just like any of my other girlfriends.
Ah, what a beautiful friendship. And isn't that like anything of someone that's different than us? Once you get to know each other as a person, all that other stuff just kind of goes away. It just makes so much difference to just get to know someone as a person.
I agree, and it's just been a real blessing to me, and it was one of those things that really made me feel that writing inspirational novels and trying to share my faith through my work was just something that gave the Lord some joy, and He
Mm.
approved of. I For no other reason. I mean, it just I'm a city girl who grew up in Texas. I just happened to be in Cincinnati. There's no reason in the world when I decided to write a book about the Amish that so many people would come into my life to introduce me to an older Amish lady. And even if that had happened, it's just because she's Amish and I write about the Amish doesn't mean we would have clicked. And we
Right.
did. And I know she'll be, my lifelong friend, even if I never wrote another book.
Mm.
So I just feel like it was just, that just the Lord really blessed me that way. And I mean that sincerely, that we were able to have this relationship. It's been invaluable to me.
Beautiful. We're visiting with New York Times best-selling author Shelley Shepard Gray, author of The Trustworthy One most recently. We'll find out more about that when we return. You're listening to Our Community. Welcome back to Our Community. Susie Thomas visiting with Shelley Shepard Gray and The Trustworthy One. I love the title. Interesting and interested to find out if we're talking about a person or is this the all-encompassing trustworthy one, relationship with God and returning back to Him. What's this book about, Shelley?
You know what? It's really about both. When I came up with the idea of this series, it really there were a couple of things that kind of sparked my need to write this series. But one of them was a Bible study group when I was in, and we were all talking one time about our relationship with God and what we each look to Him for. And someone had said, well, I just think He's really patient with me. Someone else said, well, I know when I'm having, I don't pray every day, but when I do pray and I really need Him, it's because I need Him to protect me. And someone else said, well, He's the one person that I can trust on. So I kind of took that as the theme for each novel. So, for example, and that starts out with a patient one. All the characters finally come together, and they feel that the main hero is a very patient person, but also all the characters come to feel that like God had just been waiting for them all to grow up and come back together.
Wow.
In The Trustworthy One, my heroine is kind of an unusual heroine for this group. In the Walnut Creek series, the main characters in the whole series are called the Eight. It's a group of childhood friends who grew up together just from pretty much kindergarten on, and now they're all in their mid to late 20s. But the heroine in The Trustworthy One was kind of the outsider. Her name is Kendra Troyer, and she knew all of them, but she was never really in their clique. And she wished she had been. And it turned out she had had a lot of problems growing up, and a really difficult childhood, and because of that, maybe it made her not trust people. It made her a little withdrawn. For whatever reason, she just wasn't. She was friends with them, but not really close.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so as the story unfolds, she meets a man named Nate, who she falls in love with, and she grows to trust him, and also she renews her faith in the Lord and realizes that she's always trusted him to get her through these situations,
Mm-hmm.
and here he's helping her again now be part of this group at long last.
Oh, it sounds beautiful. Do you become so close to your characters as you're writing about them that it's kind of hard to stop a book?
It really is. I can't tell you the number of times I'll have written a series, and I will. My editor will call me, and she'll be like, "Okay, Shelley, where do you want to set the next series?" And I'll say, "Can we just stay here?" And I write 2 more books, and
Yeah.
usually the answer is no. But
But I don't want to leave these people yet.
yeah, I mean, I really compare the characters in a series to when new neighbors move next door to you. At first, you know their names, you know a little bit about them. After several years of living next to them and becoming friends, you know everything about them.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they move away, you feel a loss. And that's really how I feel about my characters. I mean, I think in order to write the books that I do, I need to feel like they're true people. And I always feel by the end of a series, any one of them could knock on my door and I would know them.
Yeah.
It's hard to say goodbye to them, but I do have to say it's always, I love to write, so getting to think of something new and something completely different is fun. Next year's series, I'm in the middle of writing the second book in it, and it's a kind of a whole different thing. It's all set in Berlin, and it's around the bookmobile. So it involves my 2 favorite things: the Amish and libraries and reading, and so it's kind of fun. I have an English lady. She's kind of retired. She's a matchmaking bookmobile driver. And she goes around Holmes County, around Berlin, and meets different people and kind of helps them all through their troubles.
This is just too much fun. And I'm sure we have plays produced in Amish country. Do some of these get to become those? Have you worked on screenplays or stage plays from your books?
I've never had that opportunity. I'm not exactly sure how that comes to pass, but I'm fairly sure that an author is asked, say Wanda Brunstetter or Beverly
right.
Lewis,
Mm-hmm.
if they would be interested. That would be a dream of mine. I've also always wished I could see maybe one of my books on TV, like a Hallmark movie.
Absolutely.
But, I guess that's just a writer's way. You just have big dreams. But even if that never happens, it's my career's just it's lasted a long time, and I'm still getting contracts, and readers are still reading my books. So I couldn't be more grateful.
It's very cool, and the book is always better, but I want to see yours as a Hallmark. Oh my goodness, it could be a whole series of Hallmark movies. It's so perfect. And streaming is so important right now. They need material because people are not going into a theater as readily. Everybody's kind of rather watching Hallmark Channel. So
I agree.
Yeah,
Well,
it's perfect.
Maybe it'll happen one day. I like I said, that's kind of been a little hope of mine. And my kids, they're older. They're 27 and 28, but I think that in their mind would be like the best thing if we all got to go watch something get filmed, or at least sit together and be like, here's mom's book.
So cool.
So we'll see. You never say never, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
It could happen.
It could
so
happen.
could. Let's talk about the issue of trust. How did you use your skill in writing to make a character be able to be a trustworthy one?
I guess I just came back to myself. What do I need to be? How do I trust someone? And I've thought a lot about it, and I guess it's probably simplistic, but it makes me it feels like trust is hard to earn and easy to lose. I think we could all know that with our friends, or even with different relationships. So one of the things I always do before I get started is I look through. I have several books of Bible and Scripture verses, and I found one from Psalm 37:3, and this is what I use for this book, and it says, "Trust in the Lord and do good." And that inspired me a lot. I just feel like it's just so simple sounding, but just so complex. And what I did with Kendra and some of the other characters is it started out where Kendra didn't trust Nate. He had done something in their childhood, and she didn't like him, and he had to go and show. He realized that it's not just what you say, but it's what you do.
Yeah.
So he had to follow through on things, and when he said he had changed, and he was sorry for some of the things he had said when he was, say, 14. She didn't really believe him until she saw his actions. I think that's for all of us. I know it is as a mom when I had teenagers. It seemed for me, my kids anyway, they loved when everything was just steady. It may not be exactly what they wanted, but they could count on it. And I think for Kendra in this book, that's what she grew to love is that Nate was dependable, and also God was too. He had never forsaken her. He had always given her opportunities to heal and to be with people who cared about her. And she, when she comes to that realization that yes, not everything had been the way she wanted, but there were some good things, and she could always depend on the Lord. It was a turning point for her too.
Awesome. It's The Trustworthy One. It's the most recent in the series of the Walnut Creek series by Shelley Shepard Gray. Available now, Shelley, or are we signing up for when it's released? So you can go to.
It came out about 2 weeks ago.
Awesome.
So I love that we're having this conversation now, because when the book came out, the bookstores really weren't open. And,
right.
And so, it's been slowly making its way into bookstores. And, of course, you can get it on any online
Amazon
online
and all
store.
the places.
Yeah, sorry. Yes,
Perfect. All right. Shelley Shepard Gray, the trustworthy one, and the loyal one, the protective one, the patient one, and scores of other awesome books. Look her up. Thank you so much for joining us today on Our Community.
Oh, it was such a pleasure. I appreciate your time, and wish you well. Thank you.